Good evening, everyone. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the UNC Greensboro MFA Thesis Reading Series that will be the first and hopefully our last in the virtual format. Nonetheless, we're really excited you're all here or there out in the virtual ether for our first reader, Courtney Esco. Courtney hails from Royston, Georgia. Her fiction and nonfiction appear in the Corn Creek Review and the Agnes Scott College Writers Festival magazine, and her poetry appears in Cathexis Northwest Press. She's been a finalist for the Rita Dove Poetry Award from the Center for Women Writers 2020 International Literary Awards, and she has also received a travel grant to speak at the George Herbert Society Conference in Cambridge. Currently, she serves as the managing editor for the Greensboro Review. But if you know Courtney like I do, these accomplishments, great as they are, may ring hollow. I say this not because they aren't impressive in their own right, they are, but because these accomplishments tell us little about the content of her character and growth as a writer. So as the person tasked with her introduction, I hope to shed light on the contributions she's made, how she's bettered and fulfilled the UNCG MFA program mission, and how, selfishly, I have benefited from her wisdom and friendship both in and out of the classroom. Through the course of writing this introduction, I've had the pleasure to double back on all of her submitted work, which roughly amounts to 10 fiction stories, 2 creative nonfiction pieces, and a handful of poems. And as I did, I began to wonder, how could I successfully define her style to people who may have never read her work? The truth is, I'm not sure I can. And I think it's this very quality that I've come to love and admire so much about her writing. When I think back on her robust body of work, it feels a bit like flipping through a catalog of strange dreams. One story about a woman with an insatiable craving for burrito who witnesses a car crash, or a camera with supernatural powers to unlock the future. A family-owned circus whose main act is a boxing kangaroo, or a woman who, this one my favorite, who goes on a blind date only to realize that she'll be dining with none other than a human-like possum. Though varied in subject, Courtney's work features one important commonality, which goes deeper than motifs or characterizing themes. And it's that she's able to immerse the reader in a way that explores our common humanity. Lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention something about the beautiful way in which Courtney views and interprets literature. From the many, many books we've read together, to her keen eye analyzing and unpacking the work of her classmates, myself included. Courtney has a seemingly innate ability to dig through the useless muck of words and find a story's kernel. This kernel being, of course, the writer's original intentions, the heart of the story, often distorted and obscured in early workshop drafts. This is to say that her close analysis of my work and that of the rest of my cohort has not only salvaged many stories, but it's also made us better writers. It has often reinvigorated us, and it has made us realize our own potential. And it's this selfless devotion to the craft and community of writing that makes me confident that the list of accomplishments I read earlier will pale in comparison to the ones she's sure to achieve. And with that, I take great pleasure in introducing our first reader of the 2020 UNCG MFA Thesis Reading Series, Courtney Esco.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Matt, for that awesome introduction. And thank you, of course, to everyone who's joining us virtually tonight, and to Michael for being behind the camera. I would be remiss tonight if I did not begin by briefly thanking all the people who've helped me get to this point. Beginning, of course, with Terry Kennedy, our program director, and Jesse Van Reenen, both of whose overwhelming senses of kindness and compassion were a huge part of my decision to pursue my master's of this program, and have made work at the Greensboro Review a wonderful experience. We are also lucky to have many amazing professors and faculty here. I've had the privilege of learning from incredible writers like Holly Goddard-Jones and Jeanette Alou, who have put up with me through many a workshop, as well as Derek Palacio, Stuart Deschelle, Craig Nova, and Dr. Christopher Hodgkins, who I've also had the opportunity to work with this past year, and whose sage advice in and out of the classroom has been absolutely invaluable during my time here. But I think I can speak for all of us students when I say that every professor and faculty member at UNCG is wonderful, and we're lucky to have them all. I would, of course, also like to thank and congratulate my cohort, who will be graduating with me soon, and who have, along with many current events, made my experience here truly unforgettable. This group of extremely talented writers have helped my work grow into what it is today through tireless workshops, and have always kept me smiling and laughing with their kindness, support, and friendship since the moment I arrived in Greensboro from my one red light town. We are truly blessed in this program to have a great sense of lasting community and camaraderie, which extends still to the writers who have graduated before us, who provided such amazing mentorship and friendship when I first began, and who I've missed greatly seeing around campus. It extends also to the writers who have just entered the program this year, who are unbelievably gifted, and I'm so happy to have gotten a chance to know and learn from them as well. My list could go on, but I would like to wrap it up for now by saying a quick thank you to all my past professors and teachers and classmates who believed in me and got me this far, as well as to all my family and friends back home in Georgia who send their continued love and support. God bless you all. I would like to say a special thank you to my mother, Lucia Esco. Without her endless love and encouragement, I never would have been able to even begin to pursue my dream of writing. As well as special thanks to my brother Cody and his wife Alex for making the long trip up here to support me in person tonight. And last, but not least, I would like to thank my boyfriend, Johnny, who's here as well, who has driven so many long hours from Georgia to see me over these last 2 years, and who also, occasionally, lets me draw inspiration from him and our relationship to create my characters and stories. Which I think brings us to the story that I would like to read tonight. It is my first and favorite story in my thesis collection. It's called Yesterday's News, and it is about an old married couple that have woken up only to discover that they've died. I won't offer too much more of a preamble, since I'm starting at the beginning. I think I should be able to read about half the story with the time I have left. So, without further ado, Yesterday's News. The first time Chrissy heard about her own death was in the Sunday paper. She was standing in the kitchen, tightening her pink robe around her middle, glancing over the obituaries, on her way to the comic strips in case there was anyone she knew, when she saw the little printed picture of her and her husband, Albert. She double-checked the page headline, which read, Obituaries and In Memoriams. She looked back at their picture. She recognized it as one of their 40th anniversary photos from a couple years ago. In it, she wore a purple pantsuit with black beads around the collar, which was just a little gaudy, though she liked the shine and thought it made it more formal for the occasion. Albert, she called into the living room. What? He said, somewhat irritably. It had been silently agreed upon years ago that she refrained from specific demands on his attention until after his second cup of coffee. Albert, the paper says we've died, Chrissy said. When he didn't immediately respond, Chrissy made her way across the cream carpet to hold the offending paper in his face. He sighed heavily and searched briefly for his glasses before finding them hanging in their usual spot at the neck of his white shirt. Died? He asked, putting the glasses on and squinting as he scanned the lines. Yes, Chrissy said. Died. Look, it's even got our picture. God, my hair looks awful. Why didn't anyone tell me to smooth down my bangs? She smoothed down her reddish-brown and gray bangs now, as if doing so could right her past neglect of them. Albert read the paper in silence for a long moment, and Chrissy paced in front of him, wanting to interrupt, but knowing he'd never get through it if she talked. He was a slow reader as it was. Well, Chrissy finally said, unable to help herself. It felt like it had been ages since she handed him the paper. Well, Albert said, slowly lowering the paper and folding it in his lap. It appears that the paper says we've died. Chrissy threw up her hands. I know that, she said. That's what I told you. Well, why'd you hand me the paper then, he asked, picking up his coffee again, his first cup of the morning, and taking another sip. To see what you think, Chrissy said in exasperation. What I think, Albert said. I told you. I agree. I think it says we died. I don't remember dying. It must have happened in our sleep. Not the worst way to go. Albert, Chrissy snapped. What? Albert said, tossing the newspaper on the table and reaching for his book, the same mystery he'd been reading for a month. What should we do? Chrissy asked. Do, Albert said. Darling, I think the time has passed for us to do anything. It seems we've already had a funeral. Chrissy blew air through her nose in annoyance, putting her hands on her hips. There must be something, she said sharply. You can't just sit there and read. Well, what would you like me to do instead? Albert demanded. Turn back death? Chrissy huffed and walked back to the kitchen. Of course her husband would not think anything of the whole mess. He would think of nothing until he was ready to rise from his armchair. Age had a way of settling heavily on him so that he was immovable, impossible to fluster, unlike her. She would have to figure things out for herself. It was impossible, of course, her being dead, except it appeared that she was. Chrissy tried to think back, but the last thing she could remember was their family dinner with their children and grandchildren on Friday. They'd gotten home late and lit a fire for warmth, and Chrissy had complained because the living room had smoked up again. She told Albert to call someone tomorrow to clean the old flues and remove the birds she was sure she heard nesting in the chimney. Then she'd gotten a headache, and she and Albert had gone straight to bed, suddenly so tired they could barely keep their eyes open long enough to say goodnight. All she could recall after that was having a wonderful, deep sleep. Albert's snoring never even woke her once. She stayed in bed longer than usual, telling herself she could sleep in for a change. She thought it had only been a few more hours, but when she'd gotten up, it must have all happened so quietly. She never thought death would happen that way, right under their noses, without them realizing it. Chrissy absently tried to picture a funeral and hoped it had been a nice one, with plenty of flowers. There was nothing sadder than a funeral with not enough flowers. Chrissy felt unsettled, thinking of the long viewing lines and sad music and murmuring voices. It wasn't right, her having to think of her own funeral. She never thought she'd have to. Not in review, anyway. She hadn't thought death would be like this. Chrissy fidgeted, pacing back and forth on the cold tile floors until her stomach growled. Then she took down a power bar from the cupboard absently, part of her new diet, and munched on the irritatingly too crunchy, too crumbly oats. A shower of crumbs littered her chest from the first bite, wedging themselves down in the neck of her robe to poke sharply into the crevice of her breast. The chewing was familiar and made her feel better, the cacophony of crunches loud inside her head, drowning out for a moment all other noise. When she was done, she got some water from the fridge and drank it in one long, slow drink. Chrissy heard the creaks of the armchair as Albert got up and made his way across the living room toward the kitchen. Stepping around her, he made a show of checking the bottom of his foot for crumbs, then set his coffee cup down on the counter and put on more hot water. I thought my picture was pretty good, he said conversationally. Whatever Chrissy had wanted to hear, it wasn't that. She turned away from him with a loud sigh, tightening her robe again so much it pinched. I was wearing my navy suit, he said. Chrissy knew the real reason he liked the picture so much was because it was from after the hair plugs had taken root, giving him overly perfect rows of black and silver streaked hair, almost like it was before his hairline had started to slip back on his round head, farther and farther away from his dark brown eyes and bushy eyebrows. She had to admit he'd once had quite the luxurious mane, that he'd always worn in a handsome coif. He'd never been able to grow a decent beard, so his hair was especially important to him. It helped camouflage the outward angle of his ears. I didn't say yours wasn't nice, Chrissy said. I picked out the suit for you. I thought it was nice. Albert picked up his spoon, dried it on a paper towel, and spun the lid off the instant coffee. The sharp, earthy aroma of it woke Chrissy up. She realized that she'd felt until then like she was still asleep, still dreaming. The sound of the spoon stirring around in the mug was sharp in the silence of the little three-bedroom home. She was surprised the neighbors couldn't hear it. So, Albert said, leaning back on the counter, sipping his coffee. Chrissy looked at him, at his thick body rocked back, relaxed, like every other morning. Breakfast? He asked hesitantly. Chrissy's mouth pursed sourly. No, Albert, no breakfast, she said with finality. Why? He asked. Do the dead not eat? You ate. Chrissy wanted to snap something in reply, but for once she found herself utterly at a loss for words. Well, she began. I don't know. Well, if I'd known it meant no more breakfast, I never would have died, Albert said. Then in the absence of Chrissy's reaction, laughed shortly at his own joke. He'd never had a sense of appropriate timing. Well, if I'd known I'd still have to cook, I wouldn't have died, Chrissy replied. Then they fell into silence, the steam from Albert's mug swirling into the cold air and disappearing. Chrissy's hand worried the edge of her bottom lip. She was beginning to feel a bit queasy. Albert, what if we're not fully dead yet, she said. He raised one brow. What's fully dead, he asked. What if it's like the movies, where you, I don't know, linger for a while, right after you die, Chrissy said. If you have unfinished business before you go on, or ascend, or whatever. Or descend, Albert said. Chrissy's face fell, and she thought she might cry. Oh, come on, Albert said quickly. That was a joke. Of course we'll ascend. We believe in that, don't we? We're good people, did mostly good things. Maybe we'll even get to be angels someday. We can work our way up to it, you know? I bet the benefits are good. Chrissy felt weak. She certainly liked to think she'd spent her life doing good things. But if she'd done all she could, why was she still here? There had to be something more. Look, I'm sorry, Albert said, seeing her face. I'm sure everything will be fine, all right? What about the children, Chrissy asked miserably. They had to bury us. Albert patted her shoulder through her thick robe. That's what children are for, he said. They always knew they'd have to someday. It's the way things are. If not now, later. Chrissy sniffed unhappily, knowing he was right, but not feeling any better about it. They'll be fine, Albert assured her. We buried our parents. We made it through. I bet we'll see our parents again soon, come to think of it. Boy, I can't wait to hear what your mother has to say about you cutting off your hair. You know she always told you not to. Oh, my mother, Chrissy said suddenly, memory firing. I think I remember something. Albert waited for her to go on. My mother's brooch, Chrissy said victoriously. I was supposed to leave it to Lizzie, remember? But I never got around to telling her where I put it. Oh, Albert, that must be it. That must be my unfinished business. Albert's brow creased. The honeybee brooch, he asked. Yes, the gold honeybee, Chrissy said. I put it in the dresser, you remember? I hid it when Lizzie and Henry were little because she liked to play dress-up with it, and I was afraid she'd lose it. Oh, I must have been a horrible mother. I never even gave my daughter her heirloom. Albert frowned for a moment, then his face cleared. Oh, I get it, he said. Comb. Your maiden name was Comb, like a honeycomb. For God's sake, Albert, Chrissy said, pushing past him and walking toward their bedroom. What he should have said was that she was a wonderful mother, but she should have known better than to expect him to say what he was supposed to. What? I haven't thought about that brooch in years, he defended. Chrissy went to the dresser and began pulling out drawers. She scooped clothes out by the handfuls and tossed them on the bed. No use being neat now, she supposed. She rummaged and hunted, trying to remember where she put it. When almost all the clothes were emptied from the dresser and there was still no sign of the brooch, Chrissy lost hope of ever finding it. She didn't want to admit it, but she might have moved it from the dresser long ago and forgotten where she put it. She grabbed the final shirt to toss on the pile in defeat, but this time, the clothing passed straight through her fingers and fell to the floor. Chrissy went still. Find it? Albert asked from the doorway, coffee in hand. Just as he raised it to take another sip, the coffee mug handle passed through his own fingers, and the mug fell to the cream carpet, spilling black coffee everywhere. Their eyes met. For the first time, Chrissy noticed that the edges of Albert's arms were hazy and translucent, undefined compared to what they should be. Now you can't be mad over that, Albert said reasonably. That was not my fault. I'm just a spirit. I think I understand, Chrissy said slowly, cold dread seeping through her, making her shake. We're fading. We're getting closer to the end, I guess, to really being dead. We don't have long to linger. We're disappearing. Fast. Oh, Albert said, and Chrissy saw that he was looking at her too. She held up her hands and saw the borders of her pinkies looked blurry, like she was looking at them without her glasses. Soon we won't be able to touch anything, to move anything. It'll be too late, Chrissy said, swallowing thickly. I can't believe I wasted my last time on Earth eating a power bar. It wasn't even good. Her voice sounded almost like a wail. The power bars had been her friend Diane's idea. It was part of the new diet they'd agreed on, where they'd drink water and eat power bars and walk around the neighborhood every day. It all seemed so stupid now, trying to make her old body healthy when it was just going to croak on her without warning. At least you ate something, Albert mumbled. Chrissy felt as lightheaded as she thought a dead person could. Okay, we need to be very careful about what we do from now on, she said, gathering herself. This was no time for hysterics. Try to make the most use of the time we have left." Albert nodded, looking wistfully at the coffee stains seeped into the carpet. "Right," he said. Chrissy shifted uncomfortably in the silence, then tossed back her shoulder-length hair. "You know," Albert said after another moment, "I think I remember you giving that brooch to Lizzie for Christmas, year before last." "What?" Chrissy said. "Are you sure? Why didn't you say anything sooner, before I made such a mess?" Albert only shrugged. "I didn't remember until now," he said, "and you were moving so fast I could hardly keep up." Chrissy scowled. She considered it a moment and realized she could remember now that he said it. She had already passed on the brooch. She couldn't believe she'd forgotten. Well, it really was such a silly little thing after all. She wasn't even sure it was solid gold. "Well, never mind it then," she said. "What else have we left unfinished?" Albert shrugged again. "Well, I didn't do the crossword in the paper this morning, understandably," he said. Chrissy sighed heavily. "Nothing," he said. "Truly, I can't think of anything." "Oh, Albert," Chrissy said, "there's got to be something. In fact, there was probably more than one something. It wasn't like they'd planned to die. Their whole lives just suddenly stopped. There must be a million things. Why couldn't Chrissy think of what she'd left undone?" Thank you.
Introducing Aaron Graham is tricky business. The easy way would be to fill 10 minutes with his publications, accolades, and accomplishments. But you're at your computers. So I will try to tell you why Aaron and his work are important to me, and you can pull up his CV hosted on Emory's website. I'll never know. Aaron's collection, Blood Stripes, was the first book of contemporary poetry that I'd ever read from cover to cover. He gave me a free copy, and I needed reading material on the commuter shuttle bus. In fact, he gave all of us a copy in our publishing class on like the third week of our semester. I think he did this for 3 reasons. First, the reason he broadcasted was that he needed willing reviewers, and we were easy marks. Second, the reason we suspected, to flex on us. Nothing causes a flare-up of imposter syndrome faster than one of your classmates handing you a copy of their own book. Lastly, and most importantly, the motive behind many of his actions. Aaron strives to give himself away. Whether or not you want what he's giving you is kind of irrelevant. You're going to get it. And if you're smart and patient, you will most definitely like it. What Aaron gave me that day was telescopic access to a worldview and a set of revelations that I could not have possibly fashioned or discovered on my own, paired with the constant reminder that even if I were given the opportunity, I would not be willing or able to pay the insanely high price of admission. A lot of Aaron's work is like that, simultaneously inviting and alienating. Heady metaphysics with a southern drawl. His simplest lines are usually complex allusions full of endless rabbit holes, and his most complicated and experimental work is about commonplace stuff like sex and grits. Aaron has given me heaps of guidance in the past 2 years regarding fatherhood and motorcycle routes in North Carolina, but most frequently, his advice takes the form of ruthless, unrelenting criticism. I once submitted a rough draft for a seminar paper on Andrew Marvell at 9 p.m. on the day it was due, and the next morning I woke up to a stream of track changes on the document, starting at 10 p.m. and ending just before 3 a.m. This seminar paper was about 12 pages long, and please know that I am not exaggerating when I say that Aaron's feedback was fully 70% as long as the paper itself. And when I got to school the next day, in my mailbox, there was a printed PDF of Pliny's Natural History with highlighted sections and handwritten notes to help me understand his feedback on a single paragraph in my paper. From then on, I could always tell what Aaron really thought of my poems. If we got to workshop and he was like, brilliant stuff, good work, then I knew he thought it was garbage. But if he scribbled all over it, put line breaks where he thought they should go, and as Jen Whitaker says, mucked around where he didn't belong, then I knew I was on to something. This combination of love and criticism exists powerfully in The Goddess, a figure that I hope you get to meet tonight. His recent poems describe a mythological figure that is funny, amorous, brilliant, and of course, deeply critical of the world. Please help me welcome Aaron Graham.
Thank you, DJ. That was tremendous. Really, thank you, man. I could not have done it better myself. So yeah, first off, just thank a lot of people to thank. I suppose God and Jesus, my mom, my father who's passed, but I'm sure he'd be surprised I'm writing poetry and up here doing this. But he was an inspiration. He was a literary buff himself. He taught English at a community college, and though we have opposite tastes in literature, he likes Tolstoy. I think Tolstoy's garbage. Like Dostoevsky, he didn't understand Dostoevsky. He loved Frost. He hated Eliot. I mean, I love Frost too, but Eliot's my boy. He's like, how can you read that crap? I'm like, I don't know. So, but I thank him for my love of literature, as well as my professor I've had here, Terry, for your support, especially in this crazy time. My peers in the cohort, DJ, Matt, Courtney, everyone else out there in TV land. Thank y'all for everything. It's been a joy and a grounding point in an otherwise crazy time of existence, both for, I think, us, the country, the academy as a whole, and certainly my personal life as well. So, without much further ado, I suppose I'll get into the poetry, and we'll deal primarily, if not exclusively, with The Goddess tonight. So yeah, no military poems tonight. All right. The first poem's called "The Goddess Converses with a Passing Locomotive." Locomotive, set at us like a dead god. We've been dying down the track. Oh, strange God, not reviving husks of shucked corn, stillborn on cobs in Missouri fields, where buried effigies and pedigrees remind us expect a resurrection. We dream you, like the number 16 engine, might just be slow in arriving. That somewhere, you still out there, chugging down the river runner line, down to Kansas City. Dying like dust devils, kipping up muck and the shit that gets stuck, shining with sweat. Oil sheens become a mud pie, and our marshmallow eyes and smiles slide down your face and drop into rich earth. Dismemberment, the name given to coordinates we do not possess, the place where infinite excess touches absolute lack. Hear the heart-hungry whistle, hierophant of cabooses who will come to pass by only in the latter and last days. Conductor, paid spokesperson and prophet, we remember your lumbering voice, flooding like an incandescent light, a soft white pouring from fixtures, squeezing itself between your door hinges and dining cars, until, like a luminous moth, a cocoon question that splits shell and emerges as statement, all aboard who's coming aboard. I don't think, for example, I'm out of my mind, because you see the Missouri runs north and south. So you see, we're either going north or south. My brother Short, he liked his train rides. He'd tell me everything. He'd tell me this train goes straight on through to St. Louis. Just follow the old Missouri, where dismemberment is a mud pie in June. It feels like drying, cracking mud, just like the tracks that cross the entirety of you. You see, I never rode the train before. I only got close to that startling metal body that once. Then, I watched the stars change. The stars are a bridge over water. Crossing the Missouri, I'm a bridge, crossing the water of Missouri. Do you see that little town there? With houses scattered everywhere? There they have tractors that they don't even use. The second poem is called "The Goddess Sees Herself in a Reflection," sees her reflection in a wash basin, I suppose. All right. Wormwood made her moonshine. The good book lied. The last days came first, came in the fertile years. Each one was a breast. Her lips made words to make a new nation full of old country dirt before the weather was on her body. Burning like a broad lawn, her hair drawn like flames, her mother's screams, once wood, are now dust and oranges. She notes how limbs break mid-flow, like a misstep, like a shifting line. whitening even the fullest fires. Her arm is, just as night is, silence. Dark acres and white clover are a gesture toward the curve of her bended knee. Next one's called The Goddess's Night on the Town. Some of the poems are ironically titled, so you know. To the goddess, the night swings here. Work has fallen behind scars. Her mask is the world, so she is sober. So she dares to scour the sense, to be bewitched, to be the nay, nay, nay planting of okra and the sowing of woe beneath their rows. And she grieves the heaving of seeds and the mounds of mud stitched with seams of laced hair. The banks beat down and latticed with a full moon. So this next poem is called The Goddess Speaks from the Pumping Station at West Bank. Some clarity is needed, I found out in the title. West Bank refers to the portion of geography in New Orleans near Algiers Point where the levees failed and the pumping station overflowed during Hurricane Katrina. Does not refer to the conflict or the contested piece of territory in what used to be the Kingdom of Jordan's territory, which is now Israel and Palestine. So the goddess is not speaking from Arafat or Abbas's or Netanyahu's garden. She's in New Orleans at Algiers Point. All right. Hence the story. But yeah. All right. Those are not trash pandas mandicating mashed taters. Those are not porcupines humming 12-bar blues, rising on hind legs and carrying lunchboxes to Baton Rouge textile mills. Those are not blue jay shrieks or chicks dying in robbed nests. Those are the ghosts ambling to the pumping station at West Bank. Why so sullen, Mr. Senator? Have you flogged too few men with regulatory law, your ugly mug? Have you ruined too few Geechee women, Your Honor? We all saw her at your town hall, the single mother, and when you saw her, you couldn't understand the rationale. Your fingers, they twitched for the lash, for the gavel. So in your rebuttal on 60 Minutes, you say, agrarians, day laborers, what filled you? Rage and red clay? You tin knockers knocking indignantly with your thin bones. Just grow fatter until your death. Your conclusion is the same. Bones. Dear sir or madame, we know you, like us, would lust to show you power over the free thinkers, the anarchists, the Bob Dylans, the David Mammoths. But dear sir or madame, it has become difficult to show it now. High Priestess Bader Ginsburg, you're tired of pumping iron. The black robe, the yoga pants, the carbon-free air is still cold. What are you thinking by the pumping house station among the quiet, suture-mouthed shamans? Army Corps of Engineer is tireless steel, is picks tapping new veins. Cypress groves all moss-covered, is exhausted levees and dikes, cypress groves now dry. Lift the same gaslights held over your grandmother's flickering moments. The cypress now has died. Chugga-chugga clink-clank, a coal-fired engine, a ringing of chains, still sounding chugga-choo-choo clink-clank, the iron spikes, the timber track, laid from San Fran to Roanoke, and here and there, gangs still in chains, still talk. You answer in bills and motions, chains. Policies lived as chains. Do we chew our black bread rightly or wrongly? Do we chew our white bread better than you? Answers come at night. White partisans, mute librarians, dying before us, such as we are. Redacted, never for us, such as we are. Taxed, represented, such as we are. We are dying for others. Now back in her marshy delta groves, the goddess hears breathing alongside her. She places a left hand on a shuddering shoulder. Langhorne Clemens, hiding from his afterlife, hiding from long ago, from sailing that little barge over where the pumping station now stands at West Bank. His teeth still set on edge by gamblers, by bitter tobacco. The goddess saw no faith in the lamps of his eyes, but that which dies when cicadas or woe dip that Mississippi, that world in dusk. So her eye became again an eye, chastising him at the threshold of sunrise. She bid him dissipate, bid him light your corncob pipe, your 12 chapters, remand them to the custody of the Delta. His response? Only his impotent sprinkling his ash. When his smoke had cleared, the goddess looked into that dry dust, the two-track distance, and she didn't see the South, that port and ancient prison, that longing for liberty, for scope, that began in that moment when Sherman, with a brassy sleeve of chevrons, ornate stitching in filigree, wiped the tears from the cheek of a slave sharecropper and looked to the east, set his draw, dropped a hand to his side, and said, "Burn it all." Now, the final poem I'll read is not a goddess poem, though it's sort of that tone. It's for a dear friend who passed away this previous year named Greg Geiss, a poet, philosopher, a theologian, and one of the best human beings I've ever known. He's a great guy. He had terminal brain cancer and lasted about 9 months longer than they gave him. They gave him 2 weeks initially. And during that time, he had part of his brain removed and started having memories after the surgery about when he was like 4 and 5 years old, like vivid memories. It was crazy. And so he wrote about those somewhat, but he has a collection of poetry I recommend to everyone called Praise Music from Guernica Press. That's tremendous. So this is for him, for Greg Geiss. It's called The Alpha and the Omega. Aristotle says that prime matter is whatever already was and was always already, which I'll remind you was the nearest thing ancient Greeks had to grits. It conformed to whatever they ladled over it. I hear it still served in New Orleans with a cream gravy, never that tomatoey shit. Here, in the Middle Pass, we always bitch at weathermen, like false Elijahs. We, on our woo-easy way and our non-ado acts, the drinking, the driving to Houston, lay waste the sagebrush and the sand, hump the dunes in Chinese APCs, which break down and which, as the Buddha says, mechanics both fix and do not fix. Lord, make of our lives an ordered accounting, an unbalanced checkbook, people and gratitude. What is left to us after us? Not supplication, merely being tidy. We stayed in bed until dawn, the sun maintaining its orbit as long as could be expected, ultimately confirming the status is still quo. There remains providence in each fallen sparrow. Even if it ain't fitting to come now, it's still fitting to come. Thank you.